The African American Legend series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, literature, and religion. We will explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they'd been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Howie Evans, sports editor for the New York Amsterdam News. Welcome to African American Legends again.
Well, it's nice to be back with you, Dr. Brown.
It really is, but because you're in the sports world and you write for the New York Amsterdam News and cover the African American spectrum, you know so much about what's happened with African Americans. And one of the things that I'd like to begin with, what is the status of African Americans in sports today? I know they make a lot of money, but are they recognized the way in which they really should be recognized? Do they have the influence and power the way? Do they become coaches? Do they become owners? What's the status of that today?
Well, first, most of the African American players and the non-African American players, very few of them have any aspirations of going into any other business other than trying to become a broadcaster or something like that. And none want to be, very few become coaches or want to become coaches, although the opportunities for them are vast now. The programs that they have, particularly in the National Football League, is a great program where they bring in a lot of the African American coaches and put them in training camps and put them in learning situations and so forth. Our guys here in New York, Herman Edwards, he came through the program. Most of the black coaches now and assistant coaches came through this NFL program that they run every year, and it's been very successful for them. And in the National Basketball Association, there's very little opportunity for black head coaches at predominantly white schools, or impossible coming from the black schools to become head coaches in the NBA, because I think that Commissioner Stern, who is very loyal to his constituency, in that he believes in helping the players move in to non-playing jobs. His administration and the people that he has reflects that. And virtually all of the coaches are guys who played in the league. Mostly the black coaches, they all played in the league. I don't think there's ever been a black head coach in the NBA who did not play in the league.
Of course, things have changed a lot in the 30 or 40, 50 years. You know, the first black coach for a professional team was John McLendon of the Cleveland Pipers when it was owned by George Steinbrenner. And he had been the coach at Tennessee University, Tennessee State, and won the NC2A Division II championship, the NAIA. He's an example of someone like that. Jack Ramsey, who is now a television commentator. He was a coach who came from the collegiate ranks. So that has happened in the past, but it doesn't happen as much now. One thing that I was thinking about is that maybe coaching jobs aren't as attractive to people who are making several $1 million. So that means a lot of people don't want to be coaches. What about that?
Well, you know, we've had any number of coaches who have left the NCAA Division I ranks, and we need to make that quite clear, because I don't think there's been a coach from Division II or Division III or the NAIA who've gone into these jobs. They've gone into the NBA like Rick Pitino and some other guys, and they've found that what they can do with these 18 and 19-year-old kids, they can't do with guys who are making $10 and $15 million a year. You're not going to be screaming at these guys and yelling at these guys and pulling on them in front of 20,000 people in the arena, because they're not going to stand for that. Whereas on the collegiate level, you know, they're grabbing guys, they're berating them in front of people and so forth. So as you know, Rick Pitino scurried back to Kentucky and so forth, you know. So that's one aspect of it, because there's such a tremendous difference between coaching on the collegiate level and coaching on the professional level, whether it's the NBA or their NBA Development League or coaching in Europe and so forth, is a tremendous difference, because once you physically start paying people, it just changes, you know, the whole nature of the situation.
Well, you know, sports has been a door opener for African Americans in a lot of areas. Actually, one of the major breakthroughs in the civil rights movement was Jackie Robinson, who's on our set right here. He opened that door, and gradually more and more people came through the door, first in baseball, then in football, then in basketball, so much so that, what, 75% of the NBA players are African American, about the same percentage in the area of football, although the number of baseballs has dropped because baseball is no longer a favorite sport in the African American community. But the thing that really is interesting, that only 4 of the Division I football coaches, some 108 or 10 teams, are African Americans, yet almost half the players are African American. How do you account for that? Well,
I account for it in one simple statement: an athletic director and the alumni. At most of the major institutions, and we saw that quite clearly at South Bend, Indiana, with Ty Willingham. When he started off 8-0, and then things got a little rocky and so forth. He didn't have a good recruiting year, as Notre Dame is accustomed to having, and he lost some games. The alumni fired Ty Willingham, not the athletic director, because the athletic director did not want to fire him, and he in turn he's gone also. No one wanted to fire this guy, but the alumni is so powerful at those major schools, Notre Dame, Alabama, and all throughout the Southeast Conference. Those programs are fueled by the alumni, and the alumni fund these programs separate. A lot of the money comes from booster clubs and so forth. So they have a tremendous say in who's going to be the president of the college, who are going to be their coaches, and so forth. So,
well, do you think that they are just overtly discriminating against African Americans, or it's a combination of the old boy network, sometimes the old girl network, and race attitudes in general? What do you think accounts for that?
I think that this long-standing tradition of the old boys network is still in place. It is very firmly in place. And people are comfortable with people of their own hue. They're very comfortable with that. You get a black head coach who's never been in this kind of social environment, because that's what it becomes. They want you to socialize with these people. They want you to go out and shake hands. Well, you have a lot of people, especially in the South, Southeast, and the Southwest. These people are not comfortable having blacks in their social setting.
But so, what about the Big Ten in the North? What about the Pacific Coast Conference? What about the Big 12? Those are not southern states, and still you see most of those coaches being Caucasian and very, very few being African Americans, although Ty Willingham ended up in Washington,
yes.
And Ken Durrell, I mentioned about 2 of the 4 already, is at UCLA. Right. And Sylvester Grooms is at, of all things, his alma mater, Alabama. Mm-hmm. Those are exceptional people, and I guess their records were so exceptional that they got in there. But it seems to me, just as the NFL has a program to develop coaching and coaching skills, the NCAA ought to do likewise.
Well, again, Roscoe, it's the social environment and the alumni at these major schools. We don't have those kind of things at the historically black colleges and universities, because the weakest part of the system of our historical black colleges and universities is the alumni. Our people don't give back to the schools, and we have alumni who, once they leave, they never come back. I've I know people personally who have never ever been back to their institution, and they've been out of and they graduated 25 and 30 years ago, and they've never been back, and they don't give. So when you have a situation where the alumni is not involved with the school in a major financial manner, then it's left up to the president to deal out whatever he feels is appropriate to run his athletic program. And the thing that we have at our schools is that the presidents are so involved in the programs quite differently than at the major white schools, where the president is there, but he doesn't have the power that the black college presidents have, because they're more intimately involved.
Well, speaking of that, as you know, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, practically all of the great athletes in college were in black colleges. Morgan and Grambling and Howard and Hampton and so on. This isn't true today. The competition for outstanding athletes, particularly in the South, is so great now that mainly the state universities, a few private, are able to attract them, and they siphon away what might be the best talent, which means then that you have a second level of talent in many instances for the African-American to black colleges. What impact has this had on black college sports, and what, if anything, can or should be done about it?
Well, there were a couple of things, and I can remember Eddie Robinson at Grambling,
the legendary coach at Grambling.
Legendary Eddie Robinson, and Jake Gaither at Florida A&M.
Two great legends.
Two great coaches, two of the greatest coaches in the history of college football.
White or black? White
or black, bar none. And I can remember sitting with those guys, and I can't remember just where, but we were just sitting in a social situation, and we were just talking just like you and I are talking now, and they both said that our programs will be at the bottom of the heap in 20 or 25 years because of integration. Integration was great for the major white schools, but integration killed the great black college athletic programs as we know it. That situation prevails today, where black schools can only get the third and the fourth best athlete out of the major basketball areas, the major recruiting football areas. In the state of Florida, if a college comes in from, say, like Rutgers up this way or so forth, if they go to Florida recruiting, they are as happy as they can be if they get the third-rated athlete at that position, because that athlete is going to be better than 95% of the other athletes in the country. It's the greatest recruiting area in the United States.
California, Florida, and Texas.
Florida.
That's it.
Can't beat them.
Yeah.
Can't beat them. And of course, we can't get in this ball game. Billy Joe, who was fired by Florida A&M, and it goes back to what he said 2 years ago when he lost 63 to something in the 1AA playoffs. And he was just being honest, and he was being frank when he said, we can't compete with the 1AA schools, and we're 1AA. We can't compete with these schools any longer, because the worst thing that happened to black schools on that level is that all of these white schools upgraded their programs to 1AA, which killed off a whole line of athletes, black athletes, who would have been coming in and fed into the black college athletic system. But going to these white schools that had superior facilities and so forth, and you can't blame the kids now. You know, they're looking for opportunity. But when Billy Joe made this statement, we don't have the facilities, we don't have the alumni support, and we don't have this, we can't compete.
Doesn't this suggest one alternative? I was looking at the scores the other day about some of the smaller black schools playing each other, which I guess is good for the student body and for morale. But it doesn't suggest that maybe they should have fewer programs, fewer football programs, maybe emphasize more on track and in basketball or in swimming, because clearly the value of sports for a student and for the community is spiritual value, competition and so on. But as you say, if they're not competitive, it tends to diminish the value of that particular activity. So what are you around some of the black colleges, what are they thinking about in terms of addressing these concerns?
Well, their concern is they feel that getting national television is a way of attracting and recruiting these young men coming out of high school, because now one of the greatest things, the greatest recruiting tool in the United States is Notre Dame on NBC every Saturday. They have their own contract. They don't want to join any conference. They are there's nothing that you can beat with television, and the black schools left out of this other than the things that BET did. Now this year, ESPN is televising a full schedule of black college games.
I think they're using the Southwest Conference, the SWAC.
SWAC and the MEAC.
Yeah, I saw one of those games the other day, and they were well produced. It was good production, and the games were good.
Yeah.
So your point is some visibility and some support from the community. The other thing is many of the so-called black classics, like the bio classics, are not drawing as many people as they drew before. Is this because of promotion or the quality of the sport? What do you think?
It's a financial thing. When they started the Bayou Classic back in 71 or 70, they first played at Tulane Stadium and they drew 70,000. The next year, all of the hotels raised their rates and all. And I wrote a story about it, and Carly Nicholson and the people at Grambling and Southern University went to the Chamber of Commerce and threatened to take the game out. You have to do something to lower the rates so that we can attract our fan base, because these are people who can't afford to spend $200 and $300 a night to sleep for a few hours and so forth. And the financial thing is what keeps a lot of our people in these southern areas away from going and traveling to these classic games. North Carolina A&T and Florida A&M were probably two of the schools, and Southern, that had the greatest degree of fan support when they left the campus, when they traveled. They would help fill stadiums. Everybody wanted to book those schools. But over the last 6 or 7 years, everything has changed. Very few people travel to A&T football games now. The numbers at Florida A&M continues to dwindle, and Southern University now is almost non-existent of fans traveling to these classics that are 600, 700, 800 miles away from Baton Rouge. And it's driven basically by finance.
Well, you made a good point about television helping to promote black college sports. I think that's clearly a positive. The other part of this, however, has to do with promoting black colleges themselves. We have over 100 historically black colleges, many colleges of great distinction. We have some outstanding state universities which are predominantly black, although they're no longer segregated. And I believe that you in particular run a series of black college tours to help interest African Americans and some who are not African American in attending black colleges. Could you tell us a little about that? Well,
I started taking these tours back in the early 70s, and I distinctly remember the first tour we took with two busloads of youngsters, and we went to Winston-Salem. I remember we went to Virginia Union, went to a couple of other schools, and before we returned home, we had registered every single kid at one of those 4 schools that we taught. Every single kid was registered at a school. And one of the kids, Eddie Gregg, who was a basketball player, eventually played basketball and football, but he became a boxer after he left college because he tried out for the Jets, and he fought for the New York State Championship against Jerry Clooney a number of years ago. But there were so many success stories from those tours because it was the first time many of the kids were away from home. It was the first time where they were seeing another aspect of black life. They were on campuses where they didn't have to watch their back. They didn't, you know, everybody showed them love, and this really impressed these youngsters.
Now, who sponsored that? Who sponsors it now?
Well, I remember getting buses from the youth board, the old New York City youth board, when Tommy Hemans was the director. And then we raised money because the kids didn't have money, and we would have dances, and we would take the money and use it to feed the kids on you know, while we were away.
Does the Urban League have a program like that now?
I'm not sure.
They did at one time.
At one time they did when they had those street academies and all, but you know, the street academies kind of floundered because I think they kind of lost their direction as to what.
Well, the society changes and the needs of society change. You're in the sports writing business, sport promotion. You're one of the few full-time sports writers on a major African-American newspaper. There are a number of African-Americans now who are on ESPN and on national television and write for the major newspapers. There should be more. What can we do to get more?
Well, we have to start these youngsters at an early age, just like we start them playing bitty basketball when they're 9, and they're playing Pop Warner you know, they're playing Pop Warner football when they're 8, 9. I was up in Eastchester the other day to watch these little kids. They're like, you know, like this, playing football. So they get started. We have to do the same thing in this world of journalism. The thing that with African Americans and other minorities is that they don't really want to work at those papers. They want to work at the Daily News, the Post, the Times, and so forth, where the hiring is so against them. Because Times just letting 500 people go, I believe, and the newspaper business is not a good business now because of the advent of the internet and television. The immediacy of the internet and television, you can't. The daily papers can't beat them. Newspapers cannot beat them.
But the key thing about being involved in sports and sports reporting is use of the language, ability to write, and ability to be incisive in the analysis. Starting young people in elementary school, junior high school, will that help?
Well, most definitely. And we had a number of youngsters at the Amsterdam News this summer. They were interns, and many of them had expressed an interest in journalism, and many had either written for their school newspaper. I in particular had a young man named Ernest Tolden. He went to Xavier University, and he lost everything in the hurricane. But this young man, he came up here. He stayed out in Brooklyn. I think he stayed with his grandmother or somebody. Didn't know anything about this city. I put him in every situation. I sent him out to Yankee Stadium because I wanted him to see and for him to get an addiction to it. I didn't put him with the community people right away, but I wanted to hook him so he did all of this. Well, this kid was a fine writer, and he worked so hard. All you had to do was, I would say, give him the address of a place, and he would find his way. I wouldn't give him the directions. I said, I want you to find how to get there. And when he got there, he would call me, and he would say, Mr. Evans, I'm way up here in the Bronx, and I'm waiting for these soccer guys to come because the Major League Soccer was giving a thing. I said, if he's going to get lost, he's going to get lost going to the Bronx. He didn't get lost. He found his way up there.
You said he lost everything at Xavier University. What's happening to him now?
Well, what happened is that he's at the University of Loyola in Chicago because he's originally from Chicago. That was his home. Now, the interesting thing about this whole thing with the kids who were in all these programs at our schools is that the major white schools found universities and other places to send their kids, with the colleges that were affected in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. That has not happened with the black kids at the black universities.
And that's why people like you and myself and the rest of us in our African American community have to reach out and help these young people to be promoted in every area, whether it's sports or education or medicine or whatever. Howard, it's always good talking with you. A lot of things to think about. Today, our guest on African American Legends has been Howie Evans, a sports writer of the New York Amsterdam News.